right, we are in session 4, part number 4, the last part to this session. And in this part, we're going to be talking about whistleblowers. So one of the things, and the way I want to start this conversation off is this, okay? Because I know when you say whistleblowers, everybody thinks of like, you're on the hill somewhere in DC, talking about an organization that's doing, incredulous things. But I want to talk about it from the perspective of a nonprofit. So, and more so from how do we ensure that our nonprofit remains a going concern, it remains thriving, it remains growing, it remains fulfilling its mission to the communities. One of those ways is instituting or having some sort of whistleblower situation out there, because we're going to talk about what can be in place for this later, but having some sort of whistleblower situation involved in the success and the upkeep of that nonprofit. So the thing that whistleblowers do, and I'll have Richard or Wayne define what that is, but what I believe they allow or they help in keeping an organization on track is they're like a buffer. They actually, the checks and balances that you would have in a for-profit, publicly traded organization, they create that. That is, and it's not the only thing that creates the buffer, but it creates a buffer to say, hey, are we doing everything that we're supposed to do? Because someone on the floor might see something and it doesn't look or feel right to that person. They need to have a way to express that information so that a review can be done, some type of investigation maybe, or even just assessment, or maybe not, we shouldn't be doing this, or we should be doing that. But it creates that buffer, that check and balance that's needed for any organization to thrive. So, but that's why we're going to go into this. How can a whistleblower situation, I'm just saying situation because we're going to get into the things that are there, but a whistleblower situation inside of a nonprofit specifically can help that nonprofit. So that's how we want to start that. So I'll just open it up to Wayne and Richard, and jump in.
I guess the first thing we should probably define whistleblower policy. Whistleblower is actually a term that is kind of recent. Back in the day, we used to call it tattletale. So back in school, if somebody did something wrong, another student would tattle on them. That's a whistleblower. Or if the teacher did something inappropriate, for example, a student would go to the principal and say, the teacher did this and that. That's a tattletale. Nowadays called a whistleblower in a corporate setting. But there was always consequences for being the tattler, I guess. I was always that guy. So I was always a guy who would tattle on everybody. Because I just felt it was wrong, and you gotta correct a right or wrong, right? So oftentimes I got shunned or whatever because I would tell on somebody.
No black guys? Huh? No black guys coming home to mom? Black guys? She gave me a black eye because I told
shunned though a lot. But so in the corporate world, if an employee sees something that they feel like somebody should know about, oftentimes it's more severe than a tattletale in school. They would, for example, if you saw your boss doing something inappropriate, illegal, whatever, you could be fired. So a whistleblower policy is to provide these days it's called a safe space, where you can divulge things about the organization and feel safe and not feel like you're going to be in jeopardy of losing your job or that type of thing. So companies are supposed to have policies in place to protect employees who tattle on other employees or management of the company. So that's what this whole session's about. A policy to provide a safe space where employees can, and again, it's not because employees are vengeful or whatever, they just want to make the organization a better place. So they feel like it's incumbent on them to, make things better by divulging certain things. So organizations have created many different kinds of whistleblower protections, I guess. Many organizations, I know Chaminade is one of those, where if there is a whistleblower situation, Human Resource Department is the place to go, and it's supposed to be a safe place. I've seen organizations where the whistleblower can go to an outside party to, air their grievances, I guess, and that outside party is then tasked with trying to find ways of mitigating the situation. A lot of times it's attorneys who are the whistleblower, the whistleblower departments of companies, right? And you can go to and it makes it easier to go to an outside party in order to air your grievances, because then you're assured it won't get back to anybody in the company, kind of a thing. So that's what we're talking about, a policy to provide that kind of safe space for whistleblowers.
There's something about what you just said that I would kind of, maybe not caution, Wayne can probably kind of help me out on this one. If the situation, the grievance, whatever it is that you're exposed to is serious enough, I actually personally myself, I would actually seek the counsel of an attorney, and then now the attorney themselves might have me go through the channels of doing the formal, making the grievance known to the HR department, things of that nature. But at least I have my counsel, aware of what's going on, so that at least we can start to track the process, because there's some things internally, and again, I'm not going to divulge like what I experienced at KPMG with some of the clients, but there were issues that they were so serious that, I mean, they kind of freaked me out. Like, I don't know if I would, because I would be in fear of major retaliation, as far as, if I divulge this, it's no offense, they're going to know that I did it.
They'll shoot you.
Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? So I think if you strongly feel that the what you were exposed to internally as an employee was so significant, it might be wise, to see.
That's why it's good to have, in my opinion, a whistleblower vessel or place you go to that's outside the company, like an attorney. That's what I think is really important. Isn't it true though, in some cases you have to divulge things? It's the law, and if you don't divulge it, you're breaking the law.
There are situations like that. I think the one that most easily comes to mind is the designated reporter. So a teacher, they witness things on their students, like bruises, broken bones, things like that. They have to report that. They have a duty. And failure to report would be a violation of their duty. They would be breaking the law, essentially, by not fulfilling their role as that whistleblower, as that designated reporter. And I think that's something that, of course, we all live with and we all appreciate. What Aaron is talking about is something that's a lot of people don't think about. And what are the consequences to you if you do blow the whistle? Right? Tattler gets beaten up a lot of times, right? And in the world today, the whistleblower, a lot of times, while the law says you cannot have retaliation against that individual for blowing the whistle, for pointing out those wrongdoings, we know damn well that that's exactly what happens.
Absolutely.
And like Aaron said, beyond the attorney that you consult with, it would be ideal if you consult with an attorney for a lot of things. Right? When you first get a job, can you look at my employment contract and see if you give me a better deal? But the idea of having everything documented, and I go a step further, tell people, look, if this situation comes up, you can't underestimate how serious this is going to be.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
one of the first things you do is you talk to people who are close to you. You talk to your spouse, you talk to your kids, you talk to some of your friends, because the blowback from some of these kinds of incidences can be really severe.
Yeah.
And it's going to affect not just you as the whistleblower, but all those around you.
Yeah.
And we know that, unfortunately, there's a saying that no good deed goes
Yes.
unpunished.
Yes.
And that seems to be exactly what happened.
Yes. Yes.
But from a compliance perspective, a nonprofit should have, and actually is supposed to have, a whistleblower policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? There are a couple of things that nonprofits have to do that are kind of like remnants of what happened back when Enron
Yeah.
went under, and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was passed that regulated corporate compliance for profits as far as these kinds of whistleblower activities and things like that are concerned. A couple of vestiges of that reached the nonprofit area were the document retention policies that you have to have, and a whistleblower policy.
Right.
Right? And then now we know also from our discussions that you have to have a conflict of interest policy.
That's right.
And these are things that the board has to be very much aware of. And unfortunately, sometimes in smaller nonprofit organizations, it's going to be a board member that's going to receive the complaint.
Yeah.
Right? Because who else can you go to? Because
Right.
a lot of times, the person that might be the one that's perpetrating the wrongdoing might be the executive director,
Right.
might be
Yeah.
your boss, so
Yeah.
you can't really go to them, so you have to go to somebody else, and most organizations, particularly nonprofits, don't have HR departments,
Yeah.
right? They don't have enough resources to have an independent ombudsman or someone like that. So a lot of times, the only thing you can do is you go to the board, and more than likely you go to an individual board member that you might know.
Yeah.
Right, and they become the one that's now charged with the responsibility of dealing with this whistleblower event. So it is something that we do have to realize may happen in our role as board members. One of the things that could happen, of course, is you could go to an outside agency, you could go to the state attorney general's office. Let's say that the organization is doing things with their funding that is not in accordance with how the money is supposed to be spent. And you see this going on, and you say, it's got to stop, because instead of the people out there who are in need getting the benefit of these dollars, there's somebody in the organization that's pocketing it and they're benefiting themselves. So it's got to stop. And perhaps you can go to the Attorney General's office and file a complaint, which is essentially the process of blowing the whistle on that practice.
Because the state attorney general's office is the one who administers or oversees all of the nonprofits in the state, so that's an appropriate place to go for corporate or organization-wide issues, I guess. Yeah. So that would be good. And then I like the idea of going to a board member. But a policy needs to address all of those kinds of things in writing. Like, how can I as an employee feel safe without blowing the whistle? That's what a policy is. It's a written document that indicates what you should do when you run across this kind of thing.
The board's this is beautiful, because the board's responsibility is to promote and ensure the success and the fulfillment of the mission of the nonprofit. And one of the things, so I love that Wayne said that they can go to the state's attorney general's office. Now, that would not be the best of the best interest of the board or the nonprofit if that person were to do that. Herein lies why it's so important not only to have a policy, a whistleblower's policy, but also have a culture that says, hey, we're cool with this. It's you can feel comfortable and confident coming to us. We're going to handle your grievance in the appropriate and delicate way that we're supposed to, and you don't have to. You can feel confident and comfortable that, okay, I'm going to say this, and I can go ahead and do my thing. You know, I can do my job, and I'm okay. Versus I don't feel confident or comfortable with sharing this to the board because that board is very good friends. They're renting a home from the exec. You know, I don't know what's going on. So it's like, I don't know what they're going to say to my boss. So instead of, you know, remaining anonymous, I might be known the first day. So I know how I can remain anonymous. Let me go to the state's attorney general's office. Now, when they get the information, they're going to have to do something with this. And if it's serious enough, they're going to pull the nonprofit's card. And if that pulling of the card, if you will, bubbles up to the federal government, it's okay. I see what's going on at the state level. Let's also pull their card. So you might end up not being in existence. So you have so again, the board needs to create that culture that says, hey, it's okay if there's something that you are uncomfortable with and you need to share. We have channels and avenues where a few avenues maybe, so that you feel comfortable sharing that information so that we can then deal with it. So I think that's because, I mean, that's for us as board members, we want them to come to us first. I believe that's what we want, because if they go to the attorney general, it's, depending on what it is, that might be it. You know, that might be all of it. All she wrote for us as a nonprofit. So
I don't see many whistleblower policies that kind of define categories or levels. So, for example, let's say, I know Aaron is stealing pens from the organization because for personal use, man, he's taking home a
put on
pen.
my sock all the time.
So that's one kind of whistleblower policy versus, oh, you know what, these guys are stealing money from the organization.
Yeah.
You know, there's different levels.
Yeah.
Have you seen whistleblower policies that address different levels of?
No,
Not so much,
most
huh?
of them are just basically very, very broadly
Very
stated.
broad, very generic.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm not gonna go to the Attorney General's office if I knew, hey man, this guy I work with is stealing pens.
Yeah.
Right. I would go if it's, the organization is stealing money or the executive director stealing money, you definitely go.
Yeah.
So, to me, and this doesn't happen, so you guys out there don't really need to do this, there needs to be different policies for
Sure.
different levels.
And I think it may not rise to the level of a whistleblower. You can just have basic personnel policies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, what is appropriate use of office supplies.
But if I tattle on him, that's a whistleblower.
Well, in a way, it is whistleblowing, but it's not to the level where you would actually take those kind of actions. You know, you have the ability to deal with it internally.
Right.
Right, just the supervisor could tell Aaron, hey, Aaron, stop taking those pens.
Right.
You know, if we find out you're taking too many more pens, then we may start taking boxes, and you're gonna get fired.
Yeah.
Right,
So
and, you know, that would be an appropriate disciplinary measure for that.
that's why it's difficult. It's subjective a lot of times. What should be handled internally
Right.
versus what should be a full-blown
And
whistleblower
I think we talked about this the other time, one of the past sessions, that a lot of the whistleblower kinds of activity, levels that rise to where you have to blow a whistle, a lot of them may relate to employment practices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
we know that sometimes board members get stuck in a position where they're de facto managers
Yeah.
because the organization doesn't have the resources to hire managers. So
Mhm.
the board members are actively engaged in
Yeah.
things that could bring liability upon
Yeah.
themselves, right?
Yeah.
So they could be the one that the whistle is being blown on.
Yeah.
They're the one that's being
Yeah.
approached
Yeah.
by the employee
Yeah.
about the wrongdoing.
Yeah.
You know, so we did mention that, you know, there's that employment practices liability insurance that boards need to take a look at, you know, in addition to directors and officers coverage, because so many of the kinds of legal actions that are being taken from an employment perspective against nonprofits are those kind of discrimination actions. And that if the organization is deemed to have discriminated against an employee to the point where it's legally actionable, and the board is the body that's actually doing the day-to-day management, then the board may actually have legal liability
Liability, yeah.
for, for those incidences, so, and they may not have been aware of them, obviously, right, because they're acting as managers, but they're not necessarily on the floor every day.
Yeah.
So they would not necessarily be aware of this until somebody came
Yeah.
forward
Yeah.
with a complaint. And by that time, it's too late to do anything about it, so unless you have some kind of insurance coverage, you might find yourself having no good deed going unpunished.
I want to go through a bit of an example and just kind of walk through like what would be the steps and what would be the expectations of the board, what would be the expectations of the one that's blowing the whistle. So here's a scenario, and this will probably be, hopefully I'm not trying to touch anybody, knock on anybody's door, but it might be close to home, because this is one that I know about, and I've seen in my history a few times. I am a employee, and I work I'm in the accounting division of this nonprofit. We have an executive. We're not so big, we have an executive, and they kind of oversee the programs and other things, and oversee my division. And we have different levels. Me being the accounting associate, I know the typical types of expenses. The board has, approved, policies and guidelines that say, okay, your level of approval is $25,000. Make sure you review. Here's the standards of what can be expended. Here's what you do. So my level is $25,000, and my boss, the executive that reports to the board, their review is $100,000. So we have to have, different types of contractors come in and do different types of things, what have you. They indicated we need work done, on the roof, let's say. They indicated to me that they wanted to, they identified 2 individuals that they wanted to put forth and say, hey, I want these 2 guys to be over doing the roof. The one individual, I as the accounting manager know, this is a roofer. The other individual, it's just their cousin. And I know that their cousin is an investment banker. They're not a roofer. And the check that we need to write is $25,000 for the roofer to do, the roof, but the cousin also is going to help out, and we're going to write them a check of $75,000. Now, I can approve the $25,000 check of the roofer, but the $75,000 check that's going to the cousin, who's going to be identified as a second roofer contractor, I need to sign that, and the executive needs to sign that, and I'm saying, hey, is this right? Listen, you need to sign this. So I feel pressure to sign. If I don't sign, I'm going to lose my job. And this happens continuously. Maybe it's not the cousin next time. Maybe it's the wife. Maybe it's the son. And because I don't see the benefits. I don't see the cousin who's an investment banker coming and doing anything on Saturday or Sunday or anything, any day. And we're doing this, so I need to go to somebody. So I'm going to go to the board. Hey, listen. We're doing these things. I'm not saying that my boss is doing wrong. It's just that I personally don't see the benefits, and I know for a fact some of these individuals are related to the boss, and I don't see the services being performed by these particular individuals. And like I said, I don't know, maybe they're partnered with these other contractors or whatever, but I don't see the work coming from them. I just want to let you all know, and I'm going to do my job. Now, stopping there, what then does the board need to do in response to the employee coming to them with that information? And then what should the employee expect them as far as protection when it comes to that information? That's a tough one too.
Well, I think it's a reasonable kind of situation to have the board be involved in. Because you can't go to the executive director, because the executive director apparently the one that is also involved in a conflict of interest. Right? So that the board needs to do some kind of investigation to verify whether or not this truly is a conflict of interest. So you've given them information. The board now has to follow up on this. Depending on the kind of situation, the board may need to go to outside to conduct an investigation on behalf of the organization, because you may not want to have, or a board member may not be able to actually effectively conduct that kind of investigation to determine whether or not this is inappropriate, and not just inappropriate, but a conflict of interest. Right? And if it's a conflict of interest, then clearly the idea of the whistleblower comes in at this point, right? Because you become the whistleblower as well. So that whatever protections and whatever processes are afforded that are required to be offered to you, are done, so that there can be no retaliation after the fact, and they have to take a look at whether or not the actions of the executive director rose to the level where they were wrongful, right, and thus would justify termination. And that would be, from what you've been explaining, it would seem that it would lead to a conclusion that this is inappropriate, this is wrongful as far as the use of power, and as a result, the executive director should be terminated, and the board should make that decision going down that path.
That highlights the risk of being the whistleblower.
Yeah.
Because let's say you do go to court, you don't have the full story at that point, right? And you do, and it turns out it's not inappropriate. I mean, there's only one person.
Because the investigation was ensued, and yes, there's only one person.
So the executive director will know it's you. And although he cannot fire you immediately,
Things can be done.
it can be done. The first thing you do wrong, you come in late by 20 minutes, you're fired. I mean, so that highlights
It's
the difficulty of this whole area in being the whistleblower. It's almost impossible to have absolute protection in place.
And even if you are protected, so that executive director is terminated. So you don't have to worry about retaliation from that person because they're gone. Right? But whoever comes in afterwards is probably going to be aware of the fact that you are the one that's responsible for that other one to get fired. Right? And then the relationship is going to start out on a very negative basis to start out with, right? And it's going to get to the point where it'll be very uncomfortable for you to continue to work there.
But all the other employees will know it's you.
That's right. That's right.
That was my friend. You got him fired.
That's right. That's right. So, and that because it is a very sensitive area, and one of the things I did want to mention is that person in this situation being me did communicate to the executive. Listen, I don't know if this is right, and just the fact that the executive disregarded it, is what led me to, hey, I tried to have the conversation with them. I don't know if this is are they, doing the right thing. So I guess you have to, if you go down that road, you can't, there's nothing you can be absolutely sure about, but you need to be reasonably in the ballpark that this thing is really happening, the way it is. So.
And it's hard for you as the individual that, or the employee that is the one that had to blow the whistle. But coming back to the board responsibility. So let's say that the executive director is terminated by the board, and your executive director comes in. You're in that negative kind of environment now, right? Because everybody knows it was you that was responsible for the previous executive director to be terminated, and then you get to the point where it becomes unbearable for you to continue to work there, right? And you quit. But then you come back later on and sue the organization for what we call constructive termination, that you made it such a toxic environment that I had no choice but to quit, which is essentially the same thing as you firing me. And being that you fired me for no good reason, right? And if they are firing you, they're firing you again because you're protected against being terminated from the retaliation, right? So it'll come back either as they fired you for no cause, which you would have action against the organization for and the board, or they retaliate, which you now definitely have action against the organization and the board. So the board has to consciously be aware of what can happen to them after one of these situations evolves. Because people don't necessarily in this day and age go away quietly at night.
That's a big thing these days, toxic work environment. And that definitely would be a toxic work environment. So
I think it's all about, I mean, and it goes back to culture. I know there's a number of nonprofits that we work with, and just one of the, and it's honestly, we're not psychologists or psychiatrists, but one of the things that we've started to do a lot of, and I find ourselves doing a lot of this, is reorientating the board and the nonprofit's culture. Like when it comes to like revamping the whole inside, gutting, if you will, the operational individuals, gutting that, situation before a new person is brought in, is having a long conversation with the board. Listen, how do you want these people to feel when they get inside this organization? What do you want them to be confident and comfortable with communicating to who and how? And so it's just been culture. So if it's a culture that is damaging and detrimental, I think it's delicate. It's very delicate, and the board, the seriousness of it is, this is when you have to be a professional, I think, because if I'm an employee sharing something with you, you have to be professional enough to know that this is important. I don't need to divulge this to any and everybody. If John is a talker, he cannot keep secrets, he's one of the fellow board members, he means well, but if I share this with John without having the scope of the board saying, hey guys, this is internal information, and him having that strict, allegiance that probably would be communicated by the chair, I don't need to share it with John. So I'm not being appropriate by, I need to wait, let's get in a space where we're at the full board, share the information, and then make sure that because it has to be handled very delicately, because if that employee then is retaliated against because John couldn't keep his mouth closed, they can't meet, but we as a board have not done our jobs. And so if they do come back on us, with the power of counsel, we might have to bend it out. It's not going to be a situation where we have too many legs to stand on. So I think it's a very delicate situation. So
tough area.
Very tough area. So, well, with that, that's our whistleblower. I hope I didn't really make anybody feel sad or anything like that. Wasn't really we weren't trying to be Debbie Downers, but we just wanted you to understand that area is very serious, and it really speaks to just having a culture of openness, allowing the employees to know that, you're welcome to come to us if there are situations or issues or operations that are going on that you just do not feel comfortable with, and you don't know where to go to, and you don't feel comfortable going to anybody internally in that organization. You need to make those individuals feel comfortable with you. There needs to be a process. They don't need to guess, like, where should we go? How should we do this? It needs to be communicated to them in orientation, and again, maybe in reorientation, every so many months or years, so that they are aware this is our avenue that we need to go down as far as, when we witness things and we experience things that just do not sit well with us as employees. So with that, thank you very much. That was session 4. We appreciate you all.